Glad you could join us. Adam Pellerin here, and we are kicking off the month of August with a new face. Hannah Mears joining us. No Jemai this week, no Sophia. And so we thought this was the perfect time to introduce Hannah Mears to what is primarily a Nesson audience, but working down in Pittsburgh for Sportsnet Pittsburgh, covering the Pirates and other things. Hannah, this is the first time that we've actually spoken. This is the first time that we've actually met. Full disclosure here. So this will be a lot of fun getting to know you and having a great conversation. So how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you. I'm excited to get the conversation rolling and get to know each other better, but I'm doing great.
That's awesome. So basically, I know of you and have been following your work from New England, covering the Red Sox up here, obviously during baseball season, and know that you're new to Sportsnet Pittsburgh. You got hired this year to cover the Pirates, and I just want to get to know you a little bit better and ask you a few questions about your role and how it came to be. So, with that said, I'll just start this way. How's it going so far?
It's great. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't worked in baseball before, and obviously not to this extent. I was primarily more football, I would say. So it's definitely something that I didn't know going into it what to expect at all. I went in with a super open mind and sort of just full speed ahead, but it's been the most life changing thing. It's been amazing. I love everything about it. And this is my hometown team. So this is even cooler. The experience is definitely excelled because of that and just feels a lot better because of that. So it's been incredible. It's more than I could have ever imagined.
That's awesome. And so you got the job. What were you doing before you got to SNP?
Oh, a lot of things. I was in the grind of the freelance world for the most part. So when I graduated from Penn State in 2020, that was COVID. So my senior
Ugh.
year, the second half of my semester essentially finished online. And then, you went through the whole thing of, sorry, we're not hiring, we're on a hiring freeze, to just about anything and everything that you could imagine, which was so difficult. So my first real job like out of college was there's a local sports network here called Westmoreland Sports Network, and they cover essentially a lot of the high school sports in a local college in the area. And so I started with them, and I was making maybe like $50 a game sidelining football. And then this was sort of like after COVID broke a little bit. So nobody could go to games still, but we were streaming them for everybody. That was the best experience I could have ever gotten though. Covering high school sports is the most humbling experience of your life. You have to dig so deep to find things on people, the storylines. These people aren't used to media and coverage. So that was a really great experience for me. And I'm so glad that that's sort of where I started. And then I was substitute teaching to try to make extra money because they needed substitutes in classrooms because of COVID. So a lot of traditional substitutes who are older and retired teachers didn't want to be in classrooms because of COVID and the germs. So they were hiring people with college degrees to like sit in classrooms. And so I did that. And then I got hired by the Major League Baseball Network, which is kind of ironic, as a producer. So I was producing content for their shows from home while I was still working for Westmoreland Sports. And then I got a job producing with KDK, which is a local TV station. And I eventually got some on air time there as well, which was really great. And then I worked with the Big Ten Network and I was doing sidelining. So, a roundabout way to answer your question, before I got this job, I was sidelining with the Big Ten Network. I was still working at KDKA. And then I was also a full-time sports betting analyst. So I was making sports betting content for a company called Picks and Parlays. And then eventually getting this job, I was able to get out of the freelance world a little bit and finally take something on full time because I feel like I always had like 8 jobs at one time. There was a point I was working at the Pittsburgh Penguins doing video production and would work there 9 to 2 and then go to KDK from 2 to midnight. And that was like a normal Monday to Friday for me. So it feels very good to be in one spot now because before this is a long way to answer your question, but I feel like I was doing a million different things to try to get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a couple of things stood out about your answer there. One, I substituted one time. And I
Really?
actually, yeah, just one day. I was one and done. It was actually in college, and it was at my former high school. So I was like 3 years out of high school, going back to sub, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna be like the cool sub, and I'm gonna, kids will be like, oh yeah, this is the cool sub. You're not like a normal team. No, that was not the case. It was
Neither.
terrible. I hated it. It was the worst experience of my life, and I knew at that point I was not going to be teaching. So that's what your story about substitute teaching reminded me, even though it was under duress, right? Because it was a COVID situation and you probably wear masks and things like that and social distancing and all that stuff. So that's what I thought of. And I also thought about, my first on-air job. And oddly enough, today is the 20th anniversary of my first on-air assignment.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So thanks for joining me for that. I appreciate it to celebrate.
It's
But
great to
yeah,
be here.
so
On a cake or something.
so I actually started out in Portland, Maine, 20 years ago today, in 2004. And so, before that, I was working behind the scenes at a TV station in Boston, the Fox affiliate, working on the assignment desk, doing some news writing for the news anchors and things like that. So I got to appreciate the work behind the scenes as well. But first, I want to touch on something you said about covering high school sports and having it being humbling. And I totally hear you, because when I went up to Portland, Maine, so, geographically speaking, it's only 2 hours from Boston. So it is sort of like an extension of the Boston market, because you are covering the professional teams in Boston, the Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics, Bruins. But at the same time, it's not Boston, and there's more of a concentration on the local sports scene. And that
Mhm.
includes local colleges, some smaller colleges, and also the high schools. And I think that was a great experience for me, because yeah, I was familiar with the pro sports teams in Boston, obviously loved covering them, loved going to Fenway Park occasionally. We wouldn't go there all the time. It was really cool to do that, but it was more beneficial to cover the high school teams, because you got to know how to storytell a little bit better, right? Because you'd have to ask a number of different questions to the student athletes and the coaches, get to know them, all of these human interest stories. And I think I really started to build my skill set from a writing standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, covering the high school teams. Is that something that you sort of experienced as well?
Oh, 100%. Especially because you knew a lot of the times these high school students weren't going to say a ton. They don't know how to
Yeah.
talk to media. So you were trying to find every angle possible of somebody else to talk to really get that story, aside from the student athlete. Now, there were a ton that I worked with that you knew they were going to go Division 1 or be a little more big time. So they did know how to talk to you a little bit more. But yeah, I was like calling coaches. I was getting numbers myself, texting people, trying to figure out who these coaches were, setting up a call. And then sometimes, like, I had really great high school coaches in my area, but there were some that were sort of acting as though they were like way too busy for anything. And if they were like a Division 1 college coach, and I'm like, we're trying to put your student athletes in the spotlight. Could you give me 5 minutes to say something nice about a few of them? Like, that's all I'm asking. But
That's so funny.
it was so new to so many of them at first, because the whole streaming world like really wasn't a thing. COVID sort of made it a thing. So once I think a lot of them got more comfortable with what we were doing, they got excited about it. And then it was like, oh, Hannah's going to be here, like waiting for the call, setting it up. And then it became fun because so many of them enjoyed being treated like a professional team or a high level college team. But those storylines you really had to dig for, because they're not a Google search away. And half the time I felt like I was such a creeper, because I was going to people's social medias, like kids' social medias in high school, to try to figure out their information. And I'm like, I'm really not trying to creep on this like 16-year-old kid on Instagram, but like, this is the only way I can find out anything about these kids. But it helps a ton. And especially I feel like it's weird how easy of a transition that was from high school to what I'm doing now. I feel like my approach to how I covered those sports is how I cover the Pirates now, in terms of finding in-game stories and interesting storylines. It sort of helps you weed through the okay, this really isn't that interesting, or oh, hey, wait, this might be something. it was a very good experience, and it also, yeah, it helps you so that when you have all of this information, how to sort through, I think, and find the interesting pieces. So it was a grind, though, I will say that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Getting to know the high school kids, trying to find out that is funny. It's like, yeah, I'm just going on social media. Just it's purely for research. All right, like let's not get it twisted here.
In his
Uh,
free time, I don't know. Does he play another sport? Did he post a picture of that? Who knows?
right, exactly. And another thing you were talking about too, and I think this is really important for people who are coming into the business, right? And it's obviously, like I mentioned, 20 years for me. It's changed so much, obviously. But I think the one thing that still rings true is when you're, if you want to be, in front of the camera, that's great. Pursue that, do that. But I think it's also important to learn about the other aspects of the industry, whether you're working in a newsroom or you're working for a regional sports network or you're working for a local production. Learning how to do different jobs within whatever that is, I think is important. For me, it was learning how to write, learning how to edit, learning how to shoot, learning how to make a deadline, learning how to produce. All of those things that you sort of learn to put whether it's a sportscast together or just or a package or whatever you're doing. I think it's important to understand what other people's roles are, so that way you have a better perspective, you have a better understanding about how to do something, right? Like if you're doing a story, if you're writing a package, and you're trying to tell the story, you also have to be mindful of what you've shot, right? You have to be mindful of the video that you have. And so that way, if you've edited before, you understand. So it's like, well, you're writing to something. I can't put any video,
Yeah.
here because I don't have anything to cover. You know what I mean? So do you find that it's sort of been beneficial for you? You have the producing experience, the shooting experience, the editing experience. Has that been beneficial for you in your role now?
1,000%. I truly do not think I'd be the type of person I am on air now had I have not done any of that. I don't think I would have been ready for this type of position. And I say that because when you're doing a story like you're talking about, there's a lot of times you do have to know how to write to a video or how to adjust on the fly based off of the footage you get. But also, it just helps you respect the people behind the scenes and what they're doing, because those jobs are really intense. And like you said, you're meeting deadlines, you're trying to put rundowns together, you're trying to find stories, you're trying to figure out what's interesting. And I think just having a respect for how everything actually works, because I don't get on air if those people behind the scenes aren't able to do their job efficiently, and I'm part of that. I have to help them out. So I think I tell everybody, anyone that reaches out for advice, I'm like, the first thing you need to do is put a camera in your hand, and you need to learn how to shoot, and then you need to learn how to edit it, because also in this world, we're expected to do so much more. And by we, I mean, if you want to be on camera, you need to be expected to be like an MMJ. A lot of those roles are very popular now, like, unfortunately, but fortunately, that's just where this industry is headed. And so, I mean, I learned to shoot and edit with the Penguins. I had an internship and I was just doing that behind the scenes. I was doing that with the Steelers for a while as well. And a lot of the times that's how you get yourself on air. That's how you have to get a foot in the door. You have to be willing to do all of that. And then they'll be like, hey, if you do this, you can make a reel or you can do a stand up. And that's how you get a lot of those reps. So, it's like a networking opportunity and a way to get your foot in the door. But having all of those skill sets is so important, because a lot of the roles that are available in this industry are MMJ roles. But they also just help you be the most complete person on air you can be. I truly would not be where I am if I didn't produce and know how to make a rundown or know what works, or in a certain time or certain moment, what fits, what makes sense on a live broadcast. You have to have all of those things in your head. You can't just like pop into a broadcast and say, hey, I have this story. And it's like, well, that doesn't really fit here with what we're trying to do. It's the third inning. We're maybe down 3-0. Like, you have to have a lot of that wherewithal to know where sort of what fits in a rundown for a pregame or a postgame and things like that. So I think it's just learning to respect all of those people behind the scenes, and they're really the ones that are putting all of that together and making you look good. So yeah, it was a really really important process to be able to know every single step of this industry and how it works. And it really does help. And it helps you also learn. Like, I'll have a producer in my ear sometimes, being like, oh, take a step to your left when you're interviewing someone because the camera angle's here. And
Right.
so those are all the things, though, that sometimes you naturally do, or good social media publicity, knowing how to shoot something, what looks good, what lighting is in, and
Mhm.
all those little things to look for. I 1000% am a huge advocate of learn the stuff behind the scenes at the same time of trying to be on camera, because that stuff helps you far more than just learning how to speak in front of a camera.
No question about that. And I also think it gives you a greater appreciation and respect for what other people do, right? Because
100%.
yeah, so that way, it's just like, you know what, I could do this now, but that might put some undue pressure on, whatever, a producer or an editor or shooter even. So I think that it certainly gives you perspective as well. The one thing I didn't ask you is, why did you want to do this? What inspired you to become a reporter or an on-air personality?
Yeah, I wasn't one of those people that knew I wanted to do this like my whole life. I feel like I always loved public speaking. I loved my writing classes. Like, those are the things I thrived in. I hated math. Do not put me in a math class. I was always very outgoing, personal. Like, those were the things that were like my characteristics, I would say, if somebody asked, like, who are you and what are you good at? So growing up, I'd always played sports as well. I was a three-sport athlete my whole life. My whole life, I feel like, revolved around sports. My dad was a huge sports fan, but I didn't know that this was a thing. I never knew. Like, in elementary school, I did the local, like, little news channel in the beginning of the day, doing the morning announcements and things like that. But I didn't really know it was a career, I guess you could say. Like, no one ever pushed for me to go that way. I had just always loved working with kids, so I thought I was going to be a doctor. I thought I was going to go be a neonatal nurse practitioner, was sort of like the path I wanted to take. I wanted
Oh,
to do
wow.
nursing with babies, things like that. But I just thought that was sort of the safe route. I never felt really passionate about it. And then one summer, it was the summer before college, and I was sort of just being open and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I had got an acceptance letter from Penn State, so I went to their like new student orientation, and they had a communications program lecture that I sat through, and I was like, oh, I don't know what I want to do exactly, but like, something about this is very me. Like, something about this is me. I can find my space here. And then once I did that, the Pittsburgh Steelers have training camp in my hometown of Latrobe. So I went back for Steelers training camp because ESPN was broadcasting Friday Night Lights, which is a high school football practice that the Steelers do. What? It's not a high school football. Okay, it's their training camp practice at our high school football field in
Gotcha.
Latrobe. And they put one night, Friday night, under the lights. It's a very cool tradition. Over 12,000 people showed up this year to see them. It's really cool, and it's something they do every year. ESPN was covering it the summer before I went into college, and I got to shadow and be a runner for ESPN. And I was getting coffee for guys like Herm Edwards, Ryan Clark, like big names in the industry. And like, that was my job. I had to go to Starbucks and get their coffee. And then I had to essentially be like attentive to anything. I think I had to run to like a local like store at one point to get some sort of technology equipment for the audio people. Like, I was doing odds and ends jobs, but I loved everything about it. And that's where I was like, I want to do this. Like, this is me. I fit in this somewhere. And so ever since then, that's what I decided to go to college for, and sort of took off from there.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't always know I wanted to be, in front of the camera. I actually, both of my parents worked in television. My dad was a director. He directed commercials, worked for advertising agencies over the years. My mom worked for a station in Boston, more behind the scenes, working in the traffic department. And traffic department's not up in the helicopter, basically handling all the commercials and things that come through from the sales department and all that, and scheduling aspect of it. But I sort of knew I wanted to get into the industry, but I don't think I knew that I wanted to be in front of the camera until I actually started working in the newsroom. And that was, after college. I was doing news writing, and I was working on the assignment desk. And I was also at the same time trying to become a professional baseball player, going to different tryouts because I played baseball in college, a three-sport athlete like you. And, I was doing that simultaneously while I was trying, to figure out what I wanted to do if baseball didn't work out. And then, one of the news anchors that I wrote scripts for, it was like, hey, you know what? Like, you ever go out and work, shadow a reporter and shoot a stand up? I said, no, I've never done that. I don't know if I'd want to do that. I said, just go try it. Go do it. See if you like it. And so I did. I ended up going out on a shoot with one of the sports reporters, shot a stand up. I was like, all right, I could do this. This is fun, right? Get out of the building, do some interviews, put a story together. I did a demo in studio, and then ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to give it a go, put a reel together. Ended up sending it to Portland, Maine, and it was one of the I think it was one of the first tapes I sent out, and the timing just worked out. And I ended up getting the job. Like this, basically what happened was the weekend sports anchor had left unexpectedly and abruptly. And the timing of me sending that tape up couldn't have been better. It was at the top of the pile. And as you know, and I say tape, right? And it was tape back in my day, but like now it's like, you're sending a link to your reel on Vimeo or Dropbox, whatever. And it was actually at the top of the pile. And as you know, like, all of these news directors and people who are in charge of content in those roles are going through a bunch of these different auditions. And it just so happens that mine was one of the first ones to come in, and I ended up getting it that way. And so it's like a lot of it has to do with timing and luck in this industry, right?
Oh my gosh, I tell people that all the time. Like, right place, right time is so cliche, but that is essentially, when I look back at every job I've ever gotten, it's right place, right time plays a factor for sure, without a doubt. So when
and like, yeah,
been there.
Yep. And yeah, absolutely. And like even my job at Nesson, like, I was working at the TV station in Boston, and I was, you know how it is. We're under contract. We're contracts employees, and so it's like my contract was going to be up, and I was sort of looking around, seeing what was out there, and in the event that like A, I didn't get re-signed, or B, if another opportunity arose. And this opportunity arose at Nesson because I worked with somebody who was married to somebody who worked at Nesson, and they took another job, and so I found out about that through the spouse of that person. And I sent my again, audition in, and that was good timing as well, because they were doing something different at Nesson. They were hiring some on-air talent, so it's crazy how it works out. But in terms of your role now, you're covering the Pirates. I know you talked a little bit about the experience so far. Is there anything that surprised you about the role? Anything that you didn't expect, good or bad?
I mean, that's a good question. I didn't know. I mean, I guess like the good that came out of it is everything. Like, I just didn't expect to love baseball as much as I did. I'm going to be so honest, just because when you look at that schedule, you think it's just like so grueling and like long games. And I was like, man, like I'm taking a dive into the deep end. Like, this is my hometown team and it's really exciting, but am I even going to like this? I don't know. And I could not believe how much I love sitting at a baseball game and that being my job. Like, I absolutely love it. And I think it is because part of it is new. Like, I feel like there was a lot of things I was learning, just the odds and ends of the game that you wouldn't really know as like a casual fan a lot of the times until you're really in it. And I think that stuff is just so fun. So I think just how bought in I was to just really wanting to make our content good and cover it in that way and just put this team in a really big spotlight. I just didn't know how much I'd love it. I really didn't know how much I'd love baseball because I had never covered it before. So that was a good surprise, was knowing that I absolutely love the sport of baseball and I love covering it. I think it's so much more of a laxed environment a lot of the times for people in our position. It can be super intense for like putting together shows and deadlines and things like that. Don't get me wrong. But the coverage of a football game is like you work all week on these stories and you may get one in a game and then the rest of them are scrapped. Like they're only able to live that weekend and then they're sort of irrelevant. So you do all this work for maybe like one or two things and it can be the most frustrating thing ever. And then for baseball, it's sort of like you have all these storylines for a series. So if you don't get it in one day, it's like, okay, well, this could fit the next day. That's all right. We're not going to be like stressed about it, or like we can add on to it, or something may have evolved and things like that. So I think that's been really cool. I wasn't sure how to tackle it. So I think it's just been a surprise in just how I've been able to manage it with going in, not really knowing a whole lot of how it was going to go or how to really cover a baseball game because it's so different than football. And I think just making it your own and maybe not having a standard beforehand was a good thing, sort of just diving into the deep end and seeing what stuck was the best way to go about it. But yeah, I would say that's a good thing. I also love the travel. I wasn't sure how I was going to do with the travel schedule, but I love it. Like I didn't get to travel a ton. And like I said, I graduated in COVID. So I didn't even get to really experience a ton after that because for a few years there were so many restrictions. But I love the travel. I love getting to go see things. And my dad's a huge baseball fan. So getting to meet some like iconic people and be in really cool places has been a really cool thing to be able to share with him as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I traveled with the Red Sox a little bit like 10 years ago. We were transitioning sideline reporters. And so there was a little bit of a rotation there. And so I did some traveling, which was my first experience flying on a team charter, which was pretty incredible. And staying at the team hotels, which was pretty incredible. And now I'm traveling with the Bruins during hockey season. This will be my third year. Last year was really the first year I did primary rinkside duties and getting to see all these different cities I had never been to, especially like in Western Canada, which was pretty crazy. But you've been to a lot of ballparks now. So with that said, what's been your favorite so far?
Oh, I mean, nothing has beat the view of PNC Park. I will say that because everyone's, we say
I
the best
haven't
ball.
been there yet. I
Oh, it's
haven't been there
incredible.
yet, and when I stayed in Pittsburgh to cover the Penguins, and by the way, we had Haley Hunter on this podcast, who was awesome,
Yeah, I
and
know
I got to
that.
meet her down there for the first time, which was cool. So it's good to have both of you on here. But the hotel we were staying at in Pittsburgh, I could see PNC from my hotel window, and I was like, oh man, I got to get there. And I looked at the schedule. It was early in the year. When we were for baseball, it was early in the year, late in the year for hockey. But the Pirates are out of town, so I missed out on the opportunity to see a Pirates game. But that's on the list. But anyway, just wanted to
Yeah,
drop that in.
it's people say like we say the best ballpark in America, right? But I always said it because I was biased to Pittsburgh. But I really
Yeah,
had no comparison. I hadn't been anywhere else. Like I have never been to another baseball stadium besides there until this year when I started traveling. So every experience is a new experience for me. And I'm like, man, like, yeah, PNC Park's got it going on. When you see some of these places and you're like, well, they don't really have anything like special about it. And PNC Park has that incredible view. So it's very cool. But I would say, aside from that, that's still like top on my list. I really liked, I mean, San Francisco was cool. San Francisco has got
yeah,
a cool thing going on
good
there.
park.
However, it was freezing. So that was annoying. Just like the
Yeah,
wind, unbelievable. Like I wouldn't enjoy watching like night games there as a fan. I just wouldn't. But the ballpark in itself was really cool. Going to Wrigley was awesome. I mean, Wrigley's just sort of charming is like the best way to put it. It's just you feel baseball when you walk in there. So that was definitely on the list. I would say Toronto and Houston so far had some of the best fan atmospheres because they're like sort of domed and they are loud. Houston was loud in there. That was really cool, but that was a cool experience. And Toronto was cool because of like the CN Tower when they open it up, like that's right there. So they have
totally.
a thing, but they also have like the hotel rooms looking over the field. And yeah, so I would say some of those so far have been my favorite. I don't know if I could just pick one. I would say if I had to, like Wrigley is just really charming and just Chicago's cool and it just gives you that baseball feel. But it's been neat to see like each environment for sure.
Were you on the Boston trip
Um,
to Fenway? Did you go to that
we haven't
earlier
we
in the year
haven't
in
done
April? You
we
didn't
we
do that?
didn't go
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't do Fenway.
Oh no, we came down. That's right. This year,
Yeah, you guys came to us.
the Red Sox were in Pittsburgh. That's right. That's right. That's right. I was thinking
Yeah,
last year, so
next
yeah, my
year we'll do
brain's all
Fenway.
scrambled.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right. So that'll be your first opportunity. Well, Fenway will be tops on the list once you visit it. I promise
that's
you.
what everybody says. I need to see it.
I do want to ask you about covering Paul Skenes because that's I mean, obviously, just incredible story. The whole star power aspect of it as well with he and Olivia Dunn power couple. I'll ask you first. By the way, I don't know if you can hear my dog. She's barking now, and
No,
I
you're okay.
told
If
you
you
she
see
would
me
join.
like looking down, that was me like looking at my dog who like had to walk over here and
Yeah,
sit right beside me. Yeah.
Yeah, my dog Mabel always tries to join the podcast. She
Love
wants to
that.
be a third host. But anyway, what's it been like covering Paul Skenes?
Interesting, amazing, really special. I would say there's a lot. It's really hard to put it into words, because these are the types of moments growing up as a sports fan, but also as someone in sports broadcasting, that you kind of dream of covering these types of generational athletes. It's something I don't take for granted at all, even though it's become so normal to me now. But what's really cool about covering Paul is when he was drafted by the Pirates last year, I had been working sort of with the Pirates just in social media, and I had the opportunity to do a one-on-one sit down with him after he was drafted. It was so cool to see how much he's grown in such a short period of time. And he is just such a gem of a human being. Like, to see him be this excited college kid with so much ahead of him to now this professional, he's polished, he's Paul. In every sense of the word that anybody has described him as being humble and a hard worker and sort of intense about his process, but also just such a nice human. I mean, everything about him is true that you hear. He is truly a gem to cover. But it's also really interesting because in Pittsburgh with the Pirates, it's sort of small media, right? It's sort of reporters can walk
Right.
in, you can kind of talk to whoever you want, you have time. And then you see LA come in with Shohei Ohtani, and it's like, will he talk today? No, he only talks this day, this time. And it's because if he didn't, he'd have 900 people talking to him all the time, right? Like, he's Shohei
Right.
Ohtani. And that's sort of in such a short period of time how we've seen it start to be with Paul. You go somewhere, and as a reporter and as the team reporter, somebody who needs to talk to him occasionally, I have to be mindful of the fact that 900 people are going to want to talk to him every city we go to on like the first day of a series. So I have to be mindful of the fact that they're probably going to make a designated media time for him, and that's going to be it. And you have to abide by that. Even if you get to see him every day and have that access, you have to be mindful of the fact that so many people want his attention all of the time. So I think seeing the way that Paul Skenes has had to sort of, not him himself, but PR and people behind the scenes have sort of had to develop his process has been really interesting, because if not, it can be so overwhelming. So I think getting to see how that works is really interesting. I know that's probably not the answer people want, but it's so crazy to see like someone who's a rookie have to start getting treated that way, because so many people are interested in who he is, and rightfully so. He's generational, right? Like, what we're seeing him do right now could be once in a lifetime to cover somebody like this. So I don't take it lightly, but he is everything you want him to be and more. He's such a good human. He's such a good friend. He's just a good person. And he's so humble and respectable. And I can't imagine being 22 years old and having all of those eyes on you all the time, having the magnification of being the starter in the National League for the All-Star game, and
Yeah.
just being there, wanting to see you, and you know, the weight of the world feels like it's on your shoulders, and he's handling it beautifully. Not to mention your girlfriend is one of the most famous people in the world right now as well. So he handles everything so beautifully, and covering him is truly, I mean, something I do not take lightly, and it will definitely be, I'm sure, on the ticks of your reporter bucket list that you go through one day looking back.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the energy in that ballpark when he was pitching on Sunday was electric, and you could see that coming through. I know the Pirates ended up losing that game, but
It's something
yeah,
else.
yeah. I mean, to experience that, I mean, it was just it looked fun, like I watch a lot of baseball, obviously, and I'm watching this game, and I'm seeing it looks like great weather. Paul Skenes on the mound. I'm seeing the crowd give him a standing O once he exited, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of good energy in that ballpark. Is the fan base, it looks like on Paul Skenes days, the ballpark is jumping. Is that fair to say?
100%. And I'm someone who's from
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, right? I've seen every Pirates season that's, it goes up and
Right.
down, and it hasn't always been like that. And you could go to Pirates games and, get a ticket last second, and you can't do that anymore. People want to be there. They want to watch this team. And it's not just because of him. I mean, there's a lot of good happening right now, and Jared Jones was bringing in a crowd. I mean, that kid's electric as well. But yeah, what Paul Skenes has
Yeah.
been able to do for this city and for Pirates baseball is something from someone who's seen a lot of baseball in this city. It is very special. And that place is absolute madness when he pitches. And that ballpark, when I say it's the best ballpark in America, it is. But when it's like at full capacity, that's when you really see it at its peak. And it is something cool when he pitches and everybody's silent for like every single pitch, just like they're just enamored by what he does. And I think that's a really cool thing to witness.
Yeah, he has that it factor. We've had that in Boston, when Chris Sale was at his peak, when Pedro Martinez was at his peak, and Roger Clemens all the way back in the day. They're headline acts, and that's something that I think in the game of baseball, it was a time where you didn't have as many marquee matchups because of the age we live in baseball, right? Where analytics, you'd have openers, you'd have bullpen days, you'd have guys, if they get through 5 innings, that's an accomplishment nowadays. But to have a guy like that who is a bona fide ace who can give you 7, 8 innings on any given start, that is excitement. That brings excitement to the ballpark, and that's really come through watching Paul Skenes pitch. I do want to ask you though. You mentioned his girlfriend Olivia Dunn, and
Yeah.
obviously from afar you can see that she has been there at games, and she's obviously very supportive of her boyfriend. Have you gotten a chance to talk with her and interview her?
Yeah, we interviewed her on Paul's debut in PNC Park
Okay.
on the broadcast. She was so wonderful. Paul's parents were a little too like nervous and bought into the moment to talk, and I was totally respectful of that. We asked Livy, and she was like, "Absolutely, I'll do it." And I mean, she's so sweet. She's very, very kind. You can see why those two get along, and they're together. They're both just really genuine human beings. But it's just crazy because she's so young. She's so young. You talk to her, you're like, you're 22 years old, and you have so much of this attention, and she's just still like a young kid. So it's super fun. Not that I'm that much older than them, but there is such a difference between like 22 and 27 where I am now, like when you're in college and how you live your life and just go about your day to day. But she was so lovely to meet. I mean, I talked to her in person, like on camera, obviously on the broadcast, but then got to talk to her in the tunnel later after the game and just chatted up and just be girls. And she's really, really sweet. So she's been really nice to have here, but her life's crazy. I don't know how she does it. She was just in Paris and she's here in PNC Park and
Yeah.
everywhere. So, I mean, that girl's got a crazy schedule of her own.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're covering the Pirates, and obviously this is your first season. They've obviously had some tough years. But this year, they're above 500. They're kind of in a similar spot to where the Red Sox are right now. The Red Sox have a bit of a better record, but in terms of where they are in the wild card race, Red Sox, as we record this, are 2.5 games back. The Pirates, I think, are 3.5 games back going into tonight, and they have a couple of teams ahead of them, so it might be a little bit tougher road because the Red Sox are only trailing the last team in the wild card race, the third wild card spot right now. So that's what they are. But they were buyers at the deadline. It looked like, adding to the roster. Ben Cherington, obviously, Red Sox fans know very well. At the helm, buying. Is there belief in Pittsburgh that this team can make the playoffs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think there was the Diamondback series that just happened was very heartbreaking. We were very much in those 2 games that we lost. So I think there was, a really sense of disappointing, just like shoot, like we're so close, like we just need to get that big win every once in a while. And we've done that at points in the season. So yeah, there is belief. There's also belief when you add guys like IKF and De La
Yeah.
Cruz to your lineup and you have those bigger bats in there. That's what sort of Pirates fans I think have been waiting for. And with that being said, not having to have had to give up a lot at the trade deadline was big because we need every piece that we have right now. But there's a lot of belief because what our starting rotation looks like. When you have
Mm-hmm.
a strong core like what you do, you can go far. And I think that's just where we're at, and nobody feels down and out of it. I think there's always the comeback in us. They're a gritty team right now, but yeah, there's a ton of belief in the Pittsburgh Pirates, and that's a very exciting thing for a Pirates fan, but also just for baseball in general in the city of Pittsburgh. I know everybody's rallying behind this team, but there is the belief because of the pieces that are in place right now.
Yeah, and you got Andrew McCutcheon, who's back with the Pirates. What's it like to cover him? Somebody that's been around for so long and is sort of like a local legend there.
A dream come true. I mean, I was sent, we were talking before the podcast, there were questions like the coolest people you've interviewed, and he's on my list as one of them because growing up in Pittsburgh as a Pittsburgh fan, Kutch was sort of on your Mount Rushmore of athletes, right? Like he was everything for Pittsburgh baseball and in this city, and he brought life to the sport in the city. And so when I got to interview him, it was sort of just a really cool moment in my career. And now getting to cover him, but also know him on a more personal level is just amazing considering he's everything you'd hope he'd be. When you meet like the people you look
Yeah.
up to in your life, the athletes, and you're like, I really hope they measure up to what I hope they are. He is everything you'd want him to be and more. He'll talk to you about anything. He's so down to earth. He's a dad and a husband at the end of the day, outside of all the fame that he has in the sport of baseball. But just getting to cover him and seeing how beloved he is really cool, not just in Pittsburgh. I mean, he got his 300th home run in Philly where he had played, but now as a member of the Pirates. And he had made a comment saying, it's not easy to have both sides of the state love you. And that was a
Right.
really cool thing. Many athletes couldn't say that. Like you were either hated on one side or loved on the other. And he's loved on both. And I think that's really special and just a testament to who he really is. So getting to cover him has been an absolute dream for, someone who's grown up in the city and watched him my whole
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I feel that, and I got the first person that I thought of when you were talking about covering him and watching him growing up. Now, again, I'm older than you are. And so a lot of the players, I'm older than all the players now, but, I was just thinking about a guy who just retired, Patrice Bergeron, with the Bruins, retired the year before last and, came up as an 18-year-old, and I was in my mid 20s, or actually early 20s when he made his Bruins debut and always admired him from afar. And, had been in media scrums for a local station covering the Bruins over the years, but really didn't get to know him well until I started traveling with the team. And that was, the year before this past season, and got to know him a little bit better behind the scenes, because when you travel with the team, you have the interactions with the players, that just sort of say, hey, how you doing? And whatever. And you have like these little conversations and, lived up to the billing, just an absolute gentleman, class act, cool dude. And obviously an outstanding future Hall of Fame hockey player. Those interactions are special, right? Like, because that doesn't happen all the time. And so it's pretty cool to hear you say that Andrew McCutcheon sort of fits that bill. In terms of, your the rest of the season, Hannah, what is there left for you to sort of do, right? Like, I know you cover the team on a daily basis, but is there anything that you're looking forward to, like whether it's traveling to a different city or, telling a story of a player or just, seeing how things play out with the Pirates in terms of, making a playoff push? Anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get Jared Jones back in this rotation, hopefully sooner than later. He's
Yeah.
always really electric to watch, and he's a young kid as well, so you're rooting for his success. But honestly, overall, it's just to see how things play out. I think it was really exciting to get past the trade deadline and sort of add some pieces and watch this team come together and what they can be. But I want them to make a push so bad, and I think they can. And I think getting to cover my hometown team in my first year, have all these crazy storylines with like Kutch being here. I know he was back last year, but really just being a piece still for this team and having Paul Skenes and everything that he's brought, watching Mitch Keller sort of develop into what he is, having a guy like Jared Jones and how electric that's been, watching Brian Reynolds live up to every bit of $1 million man that he is right now on this team. I mean, there's just been so much fun to be had around this team right now. That I'm really excited just to see how this season plays out. I really hope that they can get into that wild card, but watching them sort of make teams a little worried right now, I think is fun. We haven't been able to say that about the Pittsburgh Pirates for a while. So I'm
Yeah.
just excited to see what happens and how this storyline plays out because I believe in this team. I think they're very good, every bit as good as anyone in that wild card race right now. So I'm very excited to just watch it play out as a fan, but also somebody invested in just covering the sport in itself. I'm really excited just to watch it play out because Pittsburgh baseball, like we've talked about, it hasn't been as exciting in the past as some of our other sports teams. So to see it where it is right now, I just want it to end at a really good point.
Yeah, I think we can say the same up here in Boston with the Red Sox. Big series coming up with the Royals. But
Yeah.
it's been an exciting team to watch. It's been a pleasure having you on. It's good to get to know you a little bit better and talk some baseball. We'll definitely do it again. But appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
All right, that wraps up Extra Time. For Hannah Mears, I'm Adam Pellerin. See you next time.